evening. Last year, the Pennsylvania General Assembly, that's the state legislature, repealed PURTA, the Public Utility Realty Tax Act. Now, that meant that Harrisburg would no longer collect taxes on utility and divvy them up around the state. Instead, the municipalities in which the utilities are located do the taxing directly. Now, that set off statewide a round of hearings and tax assessment appeals. Probably none was more closely watched than the one right here, the one that involved the nuclear power plant that PP&L owns in Bell Bend outside of Berwick, the Berwick Area School District, Luzerne County, and Salem Township. Our guests tonight are the attorneys who negotiated that deal for the Berwick Area School District, and we'll be back to talk to them in about 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere. And good evening, and welcome back to WYLN TV's Viewpoint Berwick region. Our guests tonight, as I said, were the two attorneys who negotiated the deal between PPL, Luzerne County, Salem Township, and the Berwick Area School District, and specifically our two guests negotiated the deal for BASD. To my immediate left is Attorney Jill Moran, Assistant Solicitor for a number of municipalities in the region.
A few, LA, yes, we are. We're lucky enough to represent a lot of the municipalities in the region.
And to Jill's left is Attorney Bob Powell, Solicitor for several other municipalities around the region. Let's run through the process that got us to the point where a deal was necessary. As I mentioned, PURTA, the Public Utility Realty Tax Act, had been repealed by the General Assembly, and there were some questions about the process by which that was done. Apparently that was added pretty late in a rather innocuous bill that was first introduced. Then that left municipalities and taxing entities, including school districts, to look at the value of any power plant that was in their region. Now, in Berwick's case, the Bell Bend nuclear plant, and there had been several different disputes as to exactly what the value of that plant was. Now, I believe $164.5 million is what it was set at in the end. But what did the school district first say that the plant was worth?
Well, I think we have to take a historical perspective, LA. PP&L and the power utilities in the state did a very good job of lobbying to get this law passed in the legislature. It was not a hot topic in the various school district assemblies and those type of things, the school district associations, because there were not that many power plants in the Commonwealth which would have been affected. Having said that, it was PP&L's law. It was the product of their drafting and their legal team, and to their credit, they wrote a law which was very helpful to them in the assessment of this plant. Now, there were discussions between representatives of Berwick School District and PPL, and there were public meetings between folks who live in that district. I happen to be in the Berwick district, and PPL, and various representations, sundry and perhaps not as direct as they should have been, were made as to what PPL was prepared to pay. It's safe to say that there was, when Jill and I were asked to come into the case to try the case, it's safe to say that there were representations made to the good people in the Berwick School District and to the county that were just not realistic by PPL. And so we started with a client who had expectations which we believed, as we interpreted the law, just could not be met and would never be met. And that certainly wasn't the problem with the listeners, the district and the folks in Luzerne County, but it was a problem for us as we got into the litigation and started to prepare for trial.
Now, if I remember, when the bill to repeal PURTA was first passed, the first story I saw in the newspaper said that the school district was in for a windfall of some wild figure like $28 million. And anybody who looked at that said, come on, be realistic. You knew that wasn't going to happen. But
well, there are people in Berwick, and Jill was in the case earlier than I was. I was preparing another trial, and I'll leave that to her. But there were some numbers that she can tell you that were thrown around were significant.
I think, Ellie, one of the issues was that because we were running the case a little late, we weren't privy to all of the conversations that were held early, but the people that we spoke with said representatives, maybe of PP&L, maybe it was just words on the street that they heard, they had thrown around figures as high as $50 million that they thought were coming into the budget. We're not sure where those numbers came from as we sit here today, but that created some I don't want to say unreasonable expectations, but certainly some expectations on the part of the citizens in the Berwick School District for what would be coming into their budget.
Now, by the time we got to the Board of Assessment Appeals, though, I think BASD was probably expecting about $4 million in tax revenue. Is that?
Well, let's clear that up. The case, as we were brought into the case late as trial counsel, we saw it being one of very, very complicated nature. Judge Conahan was hearing the case. He's a very learned trial judge. He comes from a business background, and so if anybody was going to understand this case, it certainly was he. But the fact of the matter was there was a lot of numbers, there were a lot of computations, and there was a lot of methodology that all the experts felt we had to go through in order to arrive at a number. Jill and I's belief was that we needed to boil this case down to elements that everybody could understand, that we could both use to convince the court, and also that we thought would be understandable at the appellate level, because as you know, everybody thought the case was going up on appeal anyway. The bottom line is that when you boiled out numerous calculations and differences from the experts, our expert and their expert essentially agreed on the number of $1.1 billion before essentially three calculations had to be done. The first was whether or not the court believed there was a thing called functional obsolescence, which meant, which is a well-accepted term in real estate business. We believed, and our expert believed, that functional obsolescence was zero. Their belief was that functional obsolescence was a significant number, 900 million.
Now that's because the plant originally was planned in 1973 and built the specifications.
The concept of functional obsolescence really is that the surrounding structure around the plant had deteriorated to some degree, and because of that, you needed to subtract a number from that.
Is that what they would call to the PUC a stranded cost that they would have to? Oh, it's not.
Completely different number.
Okay.
And the stranded costs, while they are in the case, they're in the case between Philadelphia and PPL as a result of that litigation under PERDA. Okay. They've injected the concept of stranded costs. Philadelphia has. And it remains to be seen whether or not the court will accept that. But the bottom line was functional obsolescence is a well-accepted concept in real estate appraisal, and the court had a decision to make. We said zero, they said 900 million. The next issue was really what the percentage of taxable property was, taxable real property. We believed it was 23%. Their expert, PPL, said 11%. The last concept was land value, and we believed the land values were $30 million. They believed the land values were approximately $1 million. So you could see that this was a significant gamble, and whoever lost was going to lose a significant amount of money, depending on where the court made their decision. We believed it was absolutely the right thing from a trial strategy and trial standpoint to reduce the case to those three numbers, because there was no sense on fighting when you were really agreeing on the $1.1 billion level.
Right.
And we were going to try our case, and we're very prepared to try our case based on those three factors.
And we're going to have to hold it right there. We'll be back and pick up the conversation. The phone number will be on the screen in just a minute or two. Give us a call if you have any questions for the two attorneys who negotiated the Berwick Area School District's tax deal with PPL over the nuclear plant in Bell Band. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. And good evening. We're back on WYLN TV's Viewpoint Berwick region with our guests tonight, attorneys Jill Moran and Bob Powell. Bob, you were just explaining that the dispute between the school district and PPL really came down to three different numbers, and we had a break there for the commercial. So we agreed on the value of the plant.
Yeah, you have the functional obsolescence, which, you know, our expert said it's zero, but quite frankly, it was a difficult concept for us to say that there was no functional obsolescence in that plant. We were prepared to argue it, we were prepared to present it to the court, but as you step back from the law and look at things from a common sense standpoint, we were concerned that the judge would, I think appropriately say, I just cannot buy that concept of zero functional obsolescence. Now, we didn't believe there was $900 million worth, but we thought it was possible that the court would find some functional obsolescence. The percentage of taxable real estate to that plant was difficult for us in that the law was written by PPL, and they had all of the numbers for each individual plant, and as you know, LA, you've seen that plant up close. There are a number of plants and buildings and things out there.
Yeah.
They had all the information. We requested it, but the fact of the matter is the law was the law. It was passed by the legislature, and that was another difficult argument for us to say, that there was as much as 23% of taxable real estate and property there. We felt very strong about our land argument. And there are some developments in the law that we've always told the Berwick Area School District and the taxpayers of the district and anybody who would listen, quite frankly, that this settlement would get better like with age, like a fine wine. And we believe it has, and it will.
So,
I'm sorry, can I just back up, because I think this is important. I think what a lot of people don't understand is the difference between the PERDA law that you referenced and the county assessment law, and why we were in somewhat of a difficult position, because we were constrained by this county assessment law that Bob has
explain the
referenced.
county assessment law then.
Well, the county assessment law says a lot, but basically when you boil it down, what it's saying is when you're looking at property and when you're valuing property like a power plant, you have to exclude any machinery or equipment.
I was going to mention that, because I think that was like 35 years ago or so that most, if not all, of the equipment inside a building was removed from the overall value of the building.
And it makes it very difficult, because you look at that plant like Bob has referenced, and you see all of these buildings and the cooling towers, and it's a very ominous structure. And I know just from driving down 93 and you see the smoke billowing, and it's a very imposing structure. But when you break it down under the county assessment law, we cannot legally consider a lot of the portions of that power plant when you're doing the analysis under the county assessment law. This is very different than PERDA. In the PERDA law, you were allowed to take a lot more into consideration, and that's why it could be valued higher under PERDA as opposed to the county assessment law. So when Bob's saying PP&L basically wrote this law, we believe they did. They lobbied very hard for this law for many years, and they kind of couched it in the terms that this would be better for your local school district, because the local district where the plant is located is going to get more money, but overall the assessment value is going to be lowered. So it's a difficult concept for some people to grasp, I think, and it was difficult for us at first.
Well, then, when under the county assessment law that you just mentioned, then, in effect, what you're taxing are brick and mortar, not a lot different from a warehouse, for example, except there's more concrete because of the NRC regulations and that the walls are thicker. That's about it.
It's a great way to put it. There was a landmark case, the Schaefer-Brune case, that said that you can't tax these buildings differently just because they're specially suited for a purpose. You can't take that into consideration. Just because this is a power plant, you can't tax it higher than you can a factory or another building. So that's, as I said, a difficult concept.
There were some great facts, as Jill said, that we would have liked to use. In any lawsuit, LA, we like to use the other side's facts because you get instant credibility and it's very hard for them to say no. There were some very, very good and compelling facts which we wanted to use from the other side, but our analysis of the law and previous holdings of the court were that they would not be introduced. And that was very hard for us because we always had to say to ourselves, will this come in? And in a lot of cases, we made the decision that, and our expert made the decision, and the case law made the decision for us. It's not coming in. Okay, so now you said the difference between not planned obsolescence. I'm sorry.
Functional obsolescence. Functional obsolescence was from zero on your side, $900 million at PPL's.
Yes.
What was the eventual middle ground that was reached?
Well, I think it's important to note this, and I don't want to throw a lot of numbers around, but the bottom line was this: on our best day, if the judge accepted every argument we made and found zero functional obsolescence, 23% of taxable instead of 11%, and $30 million worth of land values, we would have collected $3.8
That's where the $4 million figure came from.
Right.
Okay.
Now, if there was another intervening factor in that 2 days before trial, we became aware that there was an arm's length sale of a nuclear power plant. And at first, we jumped around, we were excited, we thought it was a wonderful thing for us. In our analysis, it was an arm's length sale, it was what everybody was looking for, and that was a benchmark, which there hadn't been. And in our analysis of that, and our experts' analysis of that, if the judge would have believed our 23% number, would have believed our land value number, using the analysis from that previous sale, we would have been around 2.2 or 2.3 on our best day.
Okay, well that's not much bigger than what you wound up getting anyway then.
I mean,
Exactly.
what we've said all along is this. PPL wrote the law. They studied the law. They did this for 6 years. They had a very, very good law firm representing them, and they thought it was worth $125,000 to $200,000. The settlement was $2 million.
Yeah.
William Heck, the chairman of PP&L, said, "I'm paying you essentially that multiple over what my people are telling me this is worth," and we worked on this for 7 years. That's a great settlement in the guise of a courtroom strategy and litigation, and it was one that we wholeheartedly recommended to the district because we think it's just going to get better.
Where was the sale of the nuclear plant you mentioned?
It was in New York.
9 Mile Point.
9 Mile Point.
Wasn't there an ownership transfer within PP&L at that plant during this process? Wasn't it transferred from one division to another? Did that affect the value of it at all, and did that produce any, say, real estate transfer taxes to Salem Township or the school district?
There will be real estate transfer tax triggered because of that transfer. 2 entities within PP&L transferred ownership of the property, like you noted, and because of that, there will be transfer tax. Now, that was all on hold pending the resolution of this lawsuit.
And that was negotiated into the lawsuit.
Okay, all right, we'll break. We'll come back to wrap it up. I'm going to play devil's advocate on a couple of things. Don't go away. We'll be right back. This is Viewpoint Berwick Region on WYLN TV.
White Discount Security.
And we are back with our remaining moments tonight on WYLN TV's Viewpoint Berwick Region with attorneys Jill Moran and Bob Powell, who were the chief negotiators for the school district in the tax settlement with PPL and the nuclear plant. All right, pointed question. The Luzerne County Commissioners strenuously denied, and I believe the Tax Assessment Appeal Board did too, that they knew anything about any negotiations between the school district and PPL, and they said that they were expecting the case to go to court. Superintendent David Force, however, has said they knew exactly that there were negotiations going on because one of them even attended one of the negotiating sessions. What happened? Did they know? Did they not know?
I can tell you that on Sunday, before we were to start trial on Monday, that representatives from the county and the commissioners were there. I can't tell you every memo that crossed anybody's desk from the tax assessment appeals lawyer, a fellow by the name of Lou Chandra, who's a good lawyer.
Yeah.
And what he communicated or not to his client. Lou was intimately involved with us in the preparation of our case. Lou knew the case. He was a good lawyer. He could have tried the case for the Tax Assessment Board, and he was a pleasure to work with. All the other corollary issues, quite frankly, LA, we tried to divorce ourselves from because it was extremely possible that we were going to have to try that case. And so it was important for us to stay focused and ready to go. There were, some 450 documents and exhibits that were going to get introduced, expert testimony to prepare, and it was a fight that we really didn't welcome being in. Having said that, it's no secret that I respect and Jill respects the county commissioners. I consider Tom Mikowski and Tom Pisano very good commissioners and dear friends. Mr. Urban was appraised of the situation at a closed-door meeting that they asked us to hold. And so, sometimes in the heat of battle, tempers flare. That doesn't mean that anybody was wronged, and it doesn't mean that our recommendation would have been any different.
Just to stick my 2 cents in politically, I think Mr. Urban has done an outstanding job as a commissioner thus far as well. So. From this settlement, BASD got about $2 million.
Correct.
Used to get about $100,000 under Purina.
Correct.
The county gets, I believe the figure for 2001 is $1.1 million.
Right.
Used to get about $180,000. I don't have the figures in front of me for Salem Township, but I think it's somewhere a stretch from about $15,000 to about $65,000. All the taxing entities made out a lot better. So to take the side of some of the people who have called the Press Enterprise's 32nd column, why did you guys go money digging this utility that's been such a good neighbor for so long?
Well, I don't know if I can comment as to whether they've been a good neighbor and not living in that area, but I do know that the citizens of the Berwick School District, I believe, have this white elephant in their backyard. I mean, they have this nuclear power plant that is in their backyard that is not saying something to be concerned about, but certainly something that whose presence is known. And there's certain considerations and certain benefit that should come to them because of that. And it is quite possibly a drain on different services in their community, their fire, their police, and their emergency personnel. And I think that should be taken into consideration when you're looking to see how much tax should come back to a community. And I think I have to say this, Ellie, because I thought it was a pleasure to work with the Berwick Area School District, and I feel comfortable defending them and their decision, because this was one of the most well-educated and well-informed boards that either Bob or I have ever had the pleasure of working with. They sweated over this decision, and they spent a lot of time and a lot of hours really deliberating this and making sure this was the right decision for the citizens. And I think they weighed all of the X factors, the cost of appeal. PP&L, make no bones about it, PP&L told us, if you win, if you get a decision that we consider as unfavorable, we're appealing it.
And deeper pockets than the school district.
Absolutely.
And
The school district already had to borrow money.
Yeah.
I mean, PPL had elected not to pay. And Jill's right, they were a pleasure to deal with, but, you know, they were staring down the barrel of a loaded gun. And they had kids to educate and buses to fill with gas, and they, I think, made a very, very good decision. You know, LA, if I said to you tomorrow, there's $125,000 on the table for the good of the community, or $2 million, and are you prepared to walk away from that $2 million and live with that $125,000 for the rest of the day? You better be very prepared to face the taxpayers that elected you and say, well, here's our 125, let's do the best we can.
Let me give you the criticism the other side, and I read the 30-second column every morning. The other side said, geez, these guys caved. There was so much more to get, and they just turned around and walked away, and they gave in.
Well, the max was that we could have got was $3.8 million. Now, let me tell you this. We had our theory with our good expert out of Chicago, very well respected. We believed that there was a thing called bundle of rights. That's how our land value got up to $30 million. We believed there were other things inherent in that functional obsolescence. A very good judge in Allegheny County just handed down a decision, which essentially, over just a week ago or 10 days ago, which essentially took the theories that our expert espoused and completely rejected them out of hand. Out-of-hand rejection.
Now that's the decision. We were talking briefly off mic. You said a decision just happened that is related to this case in Moran, and that's the one you meant.
Yeah, and certainly Judge Conahan had his own appraiser. He was going to use his own appraiser. It was public knowledge. He would have seen it. He would have evaluated it. It rejected our appraiser's methodology in certain respects out of hand. Does that mean our appraiser's a bad guy? No, it happens all the time in the court system. Experts are subject to that level of scrutiny. So in this case, we would have now put our case in chief in, prepared our findings of fact and conclusions of law, and sometime this week we would have had to go to the Berwick School District and say, we have bad news for you. Now when PP&L gets that decision, you don't think they're going to, William Hecht, the chairman for his shareholders, is going to say, we're still going to pay $2 million, do you? No, he would have said, we're at 200, we're at 125.
And we're going to have to end it there. So we just got to scratch the surface of it. I thought we'd get to go deeper. Thank you so much for being on tonight. Attorneys Jill Moran and Bob Powell. We'll be back in 2 weeks when our guest will be Borough Council President Lucille Whitmire. As we tell you all the time on radio, if you can do it, it ain't bragging. We'll see you then.